Something that people usually fear when they're building a computer or planning to upgrade their current is that something is bottlenecking the computer. Now, what exactly is this dreaded bottleneck? And how can you avoid it? Can you get a computer without any bottlenecks at all? Let's find out. Hey there, this is Active PC Guy, and I'll be commenting on bottlenecking today. Now, what exactly does that mean when it comes to computers? Well, usually, if you think of a bottle of water, for example, you'll have the wider base of the bottle, and then the bottleneck going all the way up to the cap of the bottle. And let's imagine that you fill it up with water or whatever, and then you flip it around so that the water pours out. Now, the wider the bottleneck is, the faster the water will go out, and the thinner it is, the slower it will go out, basically blocking the flow of the water, right? So that's the vague idea, the basic idea when it comes to computers as well. That means that you have one part of your system, the bottleneck, that is holding the rest back because it is not fast enough or does not process information fast enough to keep up with the other components of the computer. Let's say that you have a very, very old processor and very recent graphics cards or anything. And let's say that your graphics card is storing information as fast as it can, but the processor cannot keep up with it because it's of lower quality, it's slower, and it just cannot really keep up. That would mean that your processor is the bottleneck because the other parts could go faster. They could process more information and be faster, but your processor does not allow it because it's simply not good enough. So in that case, your bottleneck would be your processor. Now, can you completely eliminate any bottlenecks in a computer? You can't. That's impossible. You can never have a computer with no bottlenecks because there will always be a part that is slower than the rest and that will be holding it back. It's not a matter of upgrading it or getting the best of the best. It's just how it works. It's pretty logical. Even if you have the best of the best, there is going to be something that is let's say, the slowest of the very fast. There's always going to be a last. It's like a race, basically. If you had a computer that would have no bottlenecks, which does not exist, it's not possible at all, that would mean that there is nothing that is the slowest and everything is infinitely fast, which is not possible, it does not exist, and you would have the perfect computer with infinite resources and infinite processing power. That cannot happen, obviously, and you will always have a bottleneck. So the best that you can do, hope for, and the best you can do is to choose your parts accordingly to what you are going to use your PC for, and in relation to each other, that they are not slowing each other down massively. That does not mean that it has to be the best of the best parts, just that in terms of processing power and what they need to function for, that they are on a reasonably even level. Because let's say, for example, for gaming, let's say that you have the best of the best graphics card, you have a RTX 2080 Ti, but you have an i3. Now that i3 is going to be holding you back. The graphics cards could be going a lot faster, but the processor won't allow it. So you have two choices when you were, well, you already built it, but when you were building this PC to avoid bottlenecks, you would have two choices. You would either downgrade the RTX 2080 Ti to, let's say, a 1080 Ti or a 1080, uh, and bring up the CPU a little bit, or could upgrade the CPU to 8700K or 97 or 9900K, so that it would be about the same level and that they would be able to basically exchange information without one of them holding the other back. Um, it is There are ways to measure performance. There are benchmarks. There are all that to see what holds what back. But as a general rule, it is you can safely an i7 processor from the last two generations is not going to bottleneck you in gaming because games, although they are being getting more CPU intensive in the past few years, they are still mostly GPU bound. So gaming wise, there is a very good chance that the as long as you have a good CPU, like let's say i7 7700 or above, like 9600, 9700, 8700, 86, anything that is 7700 or above will probably not be your bottleneck in gaming unless you do a lot of, for example, streaming and all that. Your bottleneck in gaming will mostly always be your graphics card and to a lesser extent your RAM. Now, as it goes to other types of work like video editing, that sort of thing, streaming, now that will most likely be your processor. You will want a good processor for that, coupled with good RAM and a decent graphics card, but not as importantly as for gaming, let's say. For workstation loads, it is going to be mostly CPU bound as well, coupled with the RAM, and the graphics card should not be too important for its workstation type of work. So yeah, that is where it is at bottlenecking. It is not completely possible to avoid it, and the best thing that you can do is to match up your parts so that they are mostly in the same level of each other. There is a slight comment as far as data transmission goes, which is the storage drives, like hard drives, they are very slow, let's say, and they usually are also a very big limiting factor on any system. So it is very important for anyone building a new PC or upgrading their PC, and I cannot stress this enough, to get an SSD. An SSD of any sort is the biggest important, most important upgrade that you can possibly do to a computer that does not have an SSD. Um, your new processor is not going to make as much of a difference, or a new graphics card is not going to make as much of a difference to the general feel of the system and the general performance as an upgrade from HDD to SSD. It's ridiculously fast in comparison to the older models. Does not matter too much. If you never had an SSD, it does not matter too much if you're going for a standard SATA one or a PCIe or NVMe. If you don't have one, any SSD will be a massive improvement in your experience. And they are not that expensive anymore these days, so I cannot stress that enough. SSDs, because data will probably be the biggest bottleneck on any computer that does not have an SSD. That is pure and simple. Uh, get one if you don't have one. Quick. That's my biggest advice to you. Now, for the rest of the components, that's it. If you are gaming, focus on your GPU while also keeping the RAM and CPU a bit on the decent side. If you are doing video editing, 3D rendering, that sort of stuff, processor and RAM with lesser extent on the GPU. If you are doing workstation loads, just data processing, spreadsheets, whatever, emailing around, then you do want a decent ish CPU and RAM. But let's face it, that sort of work is not very resource intensive on your PC, and it also does not really. Let's face it, if you are doing that sort of thing, just web browsing, spreadsheets, you don't really need a great PC to begin with unless you also use it for something else. And if you do use it for something else, that something else is what you should shape your PC around, so to speak. Now, this isn't to say that bottleneck is never an issue or a real problem. If you have an older part that is holding back your other components in your PC, like if you have a very old processor and newer graphics card and RAM, or a very old graphics card and a very new processor and RAM, then that can possibly hold you back, and that's an actual bottleneck that you should address and upgrade that part if you want to use everything to its full potential. Now, how do you identify that? Well, there are very more specialized software that can help you detect that, but on a very basic level, you can simply do what I am about to do, and you can simply go to your start menu, as I am about to show you. Sorry for the recording program in the background, but you can just go here and check what is the usage on your processes. You can, for example, fire up your most used application, your most demanding application if you play a game or in specific, or if you do video editing, you can just fire it up and see while it is running how your usage is. If your CPU usage is very high, that means your CPU is a bottleneck, and by very high I mean constantly 80, 90, 100%. That would mean it's your bottleneck. If your memory is being used a lot, like full memory usage up to the 90 or 100%, then your memory is your bottleneck. If it's your graphics card, similarly, you will see a very high GPU usage. That means that that is your bottleneck once again. So this is the most simplistic, the easiest possible way that you can check with what your bottleneck is. That is it. If nothing is very high, if nothing is completely capped, then you don't have very significant bottlenecks to worry about. So yeah, when you are building, keep in mind the parts that you get. Don't get a massively good part and then a very bad part for another spot. Otherwise, you will experience the dreaded bottleneck that people keep obsessing about. And just remember, it is completely impossible to eliminate all bottlenecks on your PC. All you can hope for is to kind of keep them mostly in line with each other so that nothing is massively held back. If anyone has any questions about a build that they're thinking, oh, is this going to bottleneck that or not? Is it going to be a good match or not? I'll try my best to answer them. In the meantime, good luck with your part picking, good luck with your bottlenecking, and I'll see you next time.